first one from Helen X. I was wondering how Horizon 1 and Last of Us 2 could be meaningfully remastered for the PS5, and the only customer-friendly / not stupid form I could see them taking would be as launch titles for the PS5 Pro with extensive ray tracing. Is this likely? It will make the base PS5 versions of these remasters a side grade at best, considering the performance hit that any RT upgrade would have on these games. Some guy here, hi DF exclamation point. I'll preface this by saying I'm a huge Horizon stan, but I'm surprised that there's no real interest from the team in the rumoured HZD remaster. The original still looks great, but there's a lot of improvement that could be made to the quality of the water and character animations. This could be a good opportunity to experiment with ray tracing in Decima in an environment that's more forgiving than a new game, and it feels like there are ever fewer proprietary engines being used today. Am I being too optimistic, or could there actually be some interesting enhancements here? I think there's basically from my perspective, there's the philosophical side of things versus the points being raised here. The philosophical side of things is that if you've got developers of the caliber of Naughty Dog and Guerrilla Games, you kind of want them to progress. You want them to move on to new things. You want to see amazing, great new games rather than, taking old ones and essentially remastering them, especially when they're relatively recent still. I think that's kind of my point on that. John, what do you think of this concept of basically making them showcase products for the PS5 Pro?
Well, I get the feeling that if these exist, it's probably not the primary teams at Naughty Dog or Guerrilla doing most of the work, right? We don't know.
Well, you'd expect the engine enhancements to be the core technology,
which could be leveraged for whatever they're doing next, right? The Last of Us 2 thing, I think, Alex, your comment last week kind of made sense as to why it would happen. Is if they do a PC version of that game, why not also have it on PS5 natively? But Horizon, I think Horizon Zero Dawn, it's a good game, but I don't really like remasters of open world games usually, because I don't think that they're worth replaying usually, or I don't find it exciting to replay. But purely from a visual perspective, that's a different matter. And it could be very interesting indeed to see what they would do with these. And yeah, if this showed up alongside the PS5 Pro, I wouldn't be that excited about the games, but I would certainly be curious to see what they do with the technology. Although, The Last of Us Part 2, it's like, it looks so freaking good now as is. Like, I don't know, it would be weird to go in there and do a remaster thing at this point somehow, I feel, where I don't feel like they could make enough progress to drastically change it. And so much of what looks good about it, I mean, if you're gonna say do ray tracing features in there, it would be nice, but I don't think it would dramatically change the way it looks, because all the art and the lighting and everything was designed very specifically to look the way it does. And Horizon would obviously be a larger undertaking, I think, because it is an older game at this point, and it would probably, I guess, look, I would assume, similar to the sequel, which would be fine. It just, again, would be a visual showcase maybe, but I just can't understand the purpose of...
It's already 4K 60 checkerboard on PS5, right?
Yeah.
What do you really need?
Just leave it
better
be.
Image quality, maybe.
We don't need to remake that game. Good Lord.
Yeah.
They wouldn't do it, but if they got to go back and remake some old stuff, why not go into the Killzone games again? I don't know. Yeah. I'd rather see
Shadowfall.
That. I think Shadowfall, especially, even though people are pretty down on it, I think it's a very interesting and a cool game, and it's let down by a few things that I think a remaster could dramatically improve. But it's more of a Crisis style shooter than, say, the other Killzone games were, which were much more Call of Duty like. Maybe that's part of what people didn't like about it. I don't know, but
I know what you mean.
I don't know. RTGI, I think, would be a big deal for Decima and
it would be
Naughty Dog engine.
Would be cool. It's just, well, the thing about RTGI for Last of Us would be a weird one, because their baked lighting is very specifically excellent
very good
at simulating what you would get with RTGI offline, and the game doesn't have dynamic time of day. It's it's actually reminds me of Alan Wake 2 in the forest areas. Like they are doing pretty amazing baked lighting in that game. And I think, RTGI would obviously enhance the precision and fix some of the edge case stuff, but I don't think it would be that transformative without them doing major, major work to it, which I don't
it would
think
have
is
to be
worth
other
it.
stuff, I think.
There'd have to be a lot more, maybe texture detail, up the detail on some of the meshes, just like increase the granularity of everything maybe. But,
yeah, I think RTGI in the case of the Horizon Zero Dawn potential remaster makes more sense.
That makes a lot more sense. That would be fine.
Whatever, Naughty
and
Dog.
interesting.
Yeah, and you could probably slap in the exact same assets and it'd still look generally great, just because the lighting is so much better. I think we've already talked about it before. Like the original game, good looking, but like as soon as you go into any of like the places that are just like overhangs or the cities, the lighting quality goes down quite a lot. So, I mean, but it's also like I'd rather see them doing something else with their time.
But I mean, again, we don't know what the main teams are doing, and I think it's pretty obvious that these things are now being used to fund the longer development cycles that it takes to make the big stuff. And this kind of highlights a problem I have with the current state of PlayStation, and actually it applies to a lot of companies at this point. It's just games have become so complex to make, and they're relying on too few developers to get it made. And this was a strength of PlayStation in the past, is they had a lot of smaller and mid-tier teams as well, creating interesting, fun, often quirky kind of content that would fill in the gaps between these big AAA releases. And now we don't have many releases at all, and then some of them are just like remake stuff now, and it just feels like we're in a position where it's becoming, well, maybe they don't have the studio power to do this anymore like they used to, and it just takes so much time to make these big things. Like the level of quality they need to reach to actually live up to what people expect, like that's so much manpower. Like that's why I laugh when I see people arguing about the specs of these consoles, and like, that has so little to do with the way these games end up looking now. Like that's one of the least important parts, I'd say. It's everything else that's causing them to take as long as they do. And yeah, so I just wish there was some smaller stuff in there, or at least, some of the creative stuff. Like where's Team Asobi or whatever with that did Astrobot games, right?
What's
we
going
haven't
on
seen
there?
anything from them, and surely they've got to be doing something. I mean, I would assume PSVR 2, but like the first Astrobot was one of the greatest 3D platform games ever made, I would say. These guys are super talented, and it's been silence.
So going back to The Last of Us Part 1, do you consider that to be not worth doing?
No, so that one in the end, I was kind of pessimistic against that initially, but in the end, I think it worked out pretty well because it brought it up to par with The Last of Us Part 2 and maybe even a little bit beyond, and they became like two parts of a whole, right? And it feels consistent when you play them back to back. They both look amazing. Whereas, going back to the original The Last of Us and then to the sequel, they definitely, the age was evident in that original. But now they're on that same level. I don't feel like The Last of Us Part 2 really needs that kind of boost, right? It already looks good. It already looks great, I would say. But again, as you suggested, Alex, I think it is probably more likely just like, hey, they want to bring The Last of Us Part 2 to the PC, which is great. And if you're already doing a PC version, I guess why not just release a native PS5 version as well? That also makes sense. So
why not?
That whole situation probably does make sense, especially with the show that had happened. And why not do that? It's just the Horizon one that really sticks with me. It's like, it just feels like feels like a waste of time. I'm sorry. I feel bad for anybody working on it, but it's, yeah. I'm sure it's going to look good if it happens, but man.
Maybe there's something we just don't know about it yet. That is a bit of a game changer.
Wait. Let's wait and see what it is. That's true. It's just the premise that I take issue with, but maybe there's something more.